Garage.com. And now, Pat Goss.
Hi, everybody. Now, a lot of you may be thinking about buying a car. Now, one of the things that goes on is when buying a car, most drivers look for more power, but often ignore two even more important performance factors. Just buying horsepower doesn't guarantee a great feeling or performing car. See, more important are power to weight ratio and torque. A good power to weight ratio is vital for good performance. The more power relative to the weight of the vehicle, the better it will perform. High performance cars are usually very light with high horsepower engines, so they have a high power to weight ratio. A high performance engine in a lightweight sports car makes it go like stink. But put the same engine into a giant 18-wheeler and it would barely even move the behemoth. Turn that around and put the semi-engine in the sports car and it would literally tear the car apart. So there are limits. For a better performing car, you want a high power to weight ratio, not just high horsepower. Usually a higher power to weight ratio will also mean better fuel economy because the engine doesn't have to work as hard to move the car. Also consider torque, which is the twisting force needed to get the car moving. More torque makes the car feel stronger during acceleration. Also, the lower the RPM where the highest torque number occurs, the stronger the car will feel, especially in traffic. The difference here is in how a car feels, not necessarily racetrack or test numbers, and these factors are why, with similar specs on paper, they often feel remarkably different in real-world driving. So before you buy, always test drive comparable cars. You may be surprised at how different they actually feel. We'll talk more about that during the show, but right now, let's start off today's show by talking to Ray from Maryland with the Ford F-350. Ray, welcome to Goss's Garage.
Thank you, Pat. Pat, my question is, like I said, I got the 350 Ford 5.4 engine. I'll be going to a job. Truck runs very well, no problem. I'll get out, come back, maybe 5 minutes, even to an hour. Try to start it. It spins over real good, won't start. I can wait 5 minutes, 10 minutes, sometimes an hour, and go back and hit the key. It starts right up. This doesn't happen all the time. And last time it done that, I ran the battery down, so I went and got a new battery, put it in it, and it started right up.
Okay. What year is this again?
This is 2003.
All right. Now, the thing that you have to do is you've got to figure out whether it's a fuel problem or an ignition problem. And to do that, the first thing that you're going to do is to get it to react or get all your stuff in line so when it does do this, you can remove one of the easy-to-get-to coils and you can put a spark tester in the end of the coil and see if you have high-voltage spark. Now, if you don't have high-voltage spark, first thing you want to check is to see if you have power to the ignition module coming from the ignition switch, because a lot of the Fords around that vintage had huge problems with ignition switches. Now, everybody seems to think that an ignition switch is one switch. Well, yes, it is one unit, but it is multiple switches built into this one unit. So in other words, you could have one circuit that has failed. You could still have the starter circuit, so it'll crank and do the other stuff, but you may not have power to the ignition module, and you get no high voltage spark. Other things, along with that, if you do have power to the ignition module, is to check the crankshaft position sensor and the cam sensors and so on. But if you do have spark, one of the first things you want to look at, that truck should have a fuel control module mounted to a cross member on the frame back by the spare tire.
Okay.
Little module back there, and what you want to do is 2 bolts that hold it in place. You want to unbolt it, pull it down, and look at the back of it and see if the back of it is swelled up and corroded and so on, and if it is, that is probably where your issue is.
Okay.
Now, of course, there's 1,000 other possibilities, but these are the more common ones that we see.
Okay. Okay, then I'll sure check that. And like I said, it just seems funny, though, when I cut it off and go back to get into it 5 minutes later, it'll start right up if it don't start the first time.
Right.
I just
Well,
can't-
either one of these things, a bad crank sensor, a bad ignition switch, a bad fuel control module, any one of those things will react just like that. They won't start, let it sit, they cool down, or it's just like rebooting a computer, and come back 20 minutes later, start right up.
Okay.
All right?
All right, Pat, I sure thank you for your information. I'm going to try everything I can.
Okay. Let me know how it works out. Okay. This is from Joseph, and Joseph says, what would you recommend for a high-performance big block Chevy, street, track once in a while, 575 horsepower? Well, I'll tell you, the proper oil for any engine is determined by how the engine is clearanced. So when you clearance an engine, you set it up so there's a specific amount of space between the connecting rod bearings and the crankshaft and so on. Well, what you need to do to get the proper oil, which if it's set up loosely, which most custom engines are, you're probably going to want to run something like either 5, 10, or 1540 in it. But if the machine shop that built the engine, if they really dialed in the tolerances, you may want to run something as low as a 020 in it in order to get the proper flow through the engine. So the thing you have to do is you have to talk to the machine shop that built the engine to see how they clearanced it. Is it a loose engine or is it a tight engine? The looser or more space between moving parts inside the engine, the thicker the oil has to be to fill that space, because the object of oil is twofold. Number one is, well, actually threefold. Number one is to keep parts from touching one another. And in order for that to happen, well, of course, you have to have a film of oil between the moving parts so that they can't touch one another. Of course, it has to lubricate. So in order for it to lubricate, it has to flow through the engine at the proper rate. So if you get an oil that's too thick, it's going to flow too slowly. If you get an oil that's too thin, it's just going to fly through the engine. It's not going to give you the proper protection. The other thing is that oil is the only thing that cools these parts that ride against one another, or ride on a film of oil against one another. So things like crankshaft bearings and all of these different things, they all rely on the oil to absorb heat and move that heat away from those parts. As soon as you get the wrong oil in there, you get an oil that's too thick, it can't move enough to grab the heat and dissipate the heat and so on. So you wind up with moving parts that are running way too hot, and when that happens, the life expectancy is shortened. So in this case, because it's probably, 575 horsepower, almost assuredly a custom-built engine, so you talk to the person that built the engine and see what their tolerances, what tolerances they used in building it. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back here on Goss's Garage.
Stay tuned. Pat will take your calls next at 844-885-4677. Goss's Garage continues in a moment.
Are you a savvy driver who uses BG44K, or are you one of the millions of drivers who have been ripped off on some miracle gas mileage improver? Now, if you use BG44K, you know it works. And if you bought a miracle product, well, you know they don't work. Gas mileage is a function of vehicle design, and the things that control mileage can't be easily changed. But by using BG44K, you'll get the mileage your car was designed to deliver. How? Well, gasoline contains emissions-reducing additives that help the air but choke engines with mileage-robbing deposits. These deposits cause a slow, steady drop in fuel mileage. But using BG44K every 7,500 miles keeps your entire fuel system deposit-free and keeps your gas mileage at new car levels. BG44K is safe for all cars. BG44K helps maintain new car performance and new car fuel economy. So ask your repair professional for BG44K. To find a nearby professional, it's bgfindashop.com or 800-327-8883. Life changes at a ferocious pace these days, especially when it comes to maintaining our cars. For example, automatic transmissions now need regular fluid flushes. Transmission fluid breaks down with use, and although it may look fine, its additives wear out and it can no longer properly protect bands, clutches, seals, and other hugely expensive parts inside your transmission. Bottom line, more wear and a shorter transmission life. Now you can significantly extend transmission life with a BG transmission flush every 24 to 30,000 miles or 2 years. BG makes the best transmission flush machine I've ever tested. It renews all of the fluid in your transmission, not just a small part of it. The BG transmission flush machine is safe, too, because it uses the natural circulation of the transmission. Your transmission will work better and last longer. As with everything BG offers, this is a superior service. For more information, go to bgprod.com or bgfindashop.com.
This is Goss's Garage with Pat Goss. Call the show now at 844-885-4677.
All right, folks, make sure to subscribe to the Goss's Garage radio show on YouTube, where you can find tips and tricks to save you time and avoid headaches. All right, let's talk to Lee from Clinton, Maryland. Lee, welcome to Goss's Garage.
How you doing today, Pat?
All right.
I got a couple questions for you.
All right.
I got a 2014 Murano, fully loaded. Now, let me ask you, the battery in that car, would that be more amps than one that's basic?
Typically, no. Not unless there's a trailer package or something like that.
So if you got one that's fully loaded, or if you got one that's, not as many features, so you wouldn't need a battery with more cranking amps.
Well, that isn't necessarily the way it works. A lot of manufacturers, because they buy tens of thousands of batteries at a time, rather than have a whole bunch of different battery styles and amperage ratings and so on, unless there's something really unique about the car, they all get the bigger battery.
Oh, okay. So that's they're saying the thing. They just give you a battery anyway, just to cover it in case.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, my other question is alternator. Now, this might be related. Now, if now I get back to one that's loaded with a nab system, the whole bit, or one does not have a nab. does that carry a larger alternator, or it doesn't matter?
Usually not, because like a nav system, for instance, draws very, very little power, because modern electronics, they draw so little power that it doesn't really significantly impact anything.
Oh, okay.
You know, used to be...
the alternator could basically be the same from model to model.
Oh, yeah, and used to be what they did, or you would have accessories that drew 10, 15 amps for one accessory. Today, take a nav system, for instance, and many of them will only draw 1 or 2 amps of electrical energy. So, you know, it's not really any kind of a significant load. And here again, they usually build an alternator that's pretty much across the board. That way they can unify their advertising. So all their printed advertising and everything says standard equipment is a 210 amp alternator or something like that. And
which will cover the whole area.
Yeah, it covers all of them. And the exception to that, again, vehicles with towing packages usually have bigger batteries, they have bigger alternators, they have different cooling systems and different things like that. But based on accessories, no, it's not common.
I got you. I appreciate it. That gave me all the information I needed.
Okay. Thank you for the call,
I appreciate
Lee.
it. I thank you, sir.
All right. Talk to you next time. All right. Let's see. What do we have here? We have a... let's see. This is also from Lee, a different Lee. I note a lot of cars are coming in small displacement turbocharged engines only. I am suspect that in real world conditions that I will actually get better mileage with a turbo compared to a normal aspirated VVT equivalent with a larger displacement. Some articles point this out. Well, yeah, that's the whole object behind these new, smaller engines that everybody is going to. Used to be that you didn't have any of these small displacement engines, like the thought of a big pickup truck, like a Ford F-150, with a four-wheel drive and everything, and a 2.7 liter V6. That was unheard of. You know, you wouldn't even think about putting an engine that small into a truck like that. So what's going on here? Well, what they're doing is they're going to the smaller displacement. The smaller displacement increases fuel economy during normal driving. And the reason for that is really simple. If you look at how fuel is delivered to a modern car, there is an absolute ratio that's used by virtually all manufacturers, and that is 14.7 parts of air to 1 part of fuel. Now, that's what makes the catalytic converters work best, and it's best for emissions, all kinds of things. But 14.7 parts of air to 1 part of fuel. Now, how does that enter into things? Well, if we have a bigger displacement engine, the larger the displacement, the more air it takes in with each movement up and down of the piston. As the piston comes down, it sucks in more air. The bigger the opening, the longer the stroke, the bigger the displacement of that engine, the more air that comes in. And because there is this standard 14.7 to 1 ratio between air and fuel, more air comes in, more fuel goes in, to always maintain that 14.7 to 1 ratio. So now we take a smaller displacement engine during normal driving. What's going to happen? We take in less air with each stroke of the engine, each intake stroke. And that means that we're going to mix a smaller amount of fuel with it, still to maintain 14.7 to 1 ratio. So that's how they get the better fuel economy. How do they get the performance that's needed? Well, then they add a turbocharger to it. And that means during periods when you need a lot of power, the turbo is going to push more air into the engine, and then the computer is going to match that air at the 14.7 to 1 ratio. And that means we've got more fuel to burn inside the engine. We've got more air to mix it with, so we've got more oxygen to burn. And we get the power that we need. So you take one of these modern small displacement turbo engines, and if you drive it gently, you can get some amazing fuel economy out of it. And this is the trend of the future. Just about everyone out there. And I think the magic number seems to be 2 liters, turbocharged, direct injection, because direct injection meters the fuel better and so on, makes everything burn better. It atomizes the fuel better, and the more atomized the fuel is, because you have to remember that liquid gasoline won't burn. It'll only burn when it's mixed with oxygen. And to get that oxygen, we have air. So that's what is going on, and you're going to see more of it. One of my cars now, which happens to be in a body shop because somebody thought that a custom-styled back end on it would be nice, and they redesigned it with a Ford Super Duty. But anyway, it has a 1.5 liter turbo engine, and it runs really, really well. Performance is completely acceptable. It's not a race car or anything of the kind, but a teeny little 1.5 liter engine, and I'm getting about 41, 42 miles to the gallon on a fair-sized 4-door sedan with all the bells and whistles and so on. And, it's just, hey, this is something, this is a trend that is going to continue. All right, let's go back to the phones. Talk to John from King George, Virginia with a 89 Isuzu Trooper. John, welcome to Goss's Garage.
Well, thank you very much for having me on the show again today, Pat.
Absolutely.
That 89 Trooper. Sir?
Yeah.
That 89 Trooper, you helped me with that a couple of weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and you were right on the money. It was that they had to put a check, what do you call it, a pressure check on the line coming from the gas tank, and when they found that it only had 20-pound pressure, and the man said it's supposed to have been reading from about 35 to 40, 45.
Right.
It's now reading 50. It's now reading 50, Pat, because he took the tank down. It did not need a fuel pump. It needed a little tiny rubber hose. It had a split in it.
Oh,
and
yeah.
like a straw with a hole in it, it would not suck gas.
Yeah, we see that from time to time on older vehicles. As a matter of fact, a car that we used to have, my wife got stranded in Salisbury, Maryland with this car, and it just wouldn't run, wouldn't start all of a sudden. And when we finally got it back here, it didn't have fuel pressure, and like it should be, fuel pressure was low and volume was low. And when we pulled the tank down, there's a little rubber hose between the bottom of the fuel pump and the pickup tube, and that had a pinhole in it, and it was pulling air.
That's what it was. And I sure appreciate you and your show, Pat. I swear I listen to you religiously whenever you're on.
Well, thank you,
I
John.
watch your Motor Week. I watch your Motor Week every weekend, and I just love it.
Well, thank
And
you. I appreciate
thank
that.
thank God for you, Pat. And you fixed it, and I appreciate it.
All right. Well, I'm glad it
And,
worked out for you.
Have a nice weekend, and Happy New Year.
Thank you very much, John. Take care. Oh, well, you know, every once in a while, somebody lets me know when something like that works, and, you know, it's a good feeling when you know that you can help somebody out and your ideas actually pan out. So it's nice to hear from John. I'm glad that did work. You know, this business of power to weight ratio and stuff like that, you know, that all has an effect on fuel economy and so on. And when you think about fuel economy, one of the things that you have to consider is that the more cylinders you have, the less efficient they are per cylinder. And the reason for that is that if you envision the inside of an engine, you got a piston. The piston has piston rings on it to seal it to the cylinder walls. And as those pistons move up and down in the cylinder wall, there is drag on them. There's friction. Now, does a four-cylinder engine have as much drag as a six-cylinder engine? No, absolutely not. It doesn't have as much friction. As we add cylinders, we add friction. And as we add friction, the engine becomes less efficient, because the friction in general is the enemy of everything mechanical. All of the different lubricants and everything that we put into engines, into transmissions, and all of these things, it's all to fight friction, because friction causes things to wear and so on. If we can control friction, then we get something that really freewheels and so on. But you can't do that inside an engine, because the way the rings expand, they're springy, they push out against the cylinders, and that creates a certain amount of built-in friction. Now, that springiness used to be that the piston rings were designed in such a way that they put a lot of pressure on the cylinder walls. They did that for sealing purposes. Well, over the years, they have developed rings that can make the engine airtight and so on without all of this tension, all of this pressure against the cylinder walls. These are called low tension or low friction piston rings, and just about everybody uses them these days. And this is where a problem comes in, because you'll hear lots of things about cars that burn oil and have all these different problems and so on. And part of that is because you, the driver, you don't change the oil frequently enough. You want to see how long you can go. If you got something on your dash that says you can go 10,000 miles, hey, I want to go 10,000, and then I'll miss that number by 1,500 or 2,000 miles. Why? I don't know. Oil is the cheapest preventive maintenance thing you can do on a car. Yet everybody wants to leave the oil in the car as long as they possibly can. And it gets thicker, and it builds sludge, and it causes these low-tension piston rings to stick. And when they stick, they can't control the amount of oil in the cylinders, so some of the oil gets pushed up into the top of the cylinder, and it burns. So you'll hear about these cars that burn copious amounts of oil. Some of the Cadillacs, some of the Hondas, and so on, a quart of oil every 75 or 100 miles and so on. Well, frequently, we can correct that problem simply by straightening out the mess that you made. You didn't change the oil often enough, so you got all this gum and varnish that is building up on those rings, Well, it didn't used to be a problem because the rings had such great spring tension on them that they could just push themselves out past gum and varnish. Well, not anymore. Low tension, low friction piston rings can't overcome this varnish, and they stick into the piston, and now you have oil consumption problems. So what we do with them is we do the BG Performance Oil Change. Now, that, to me, is the dumbest name for one of the greatest services that I've seen in a long time, because essentially it is a flush. But I think the reason they didn't use the term flush is because some shops around the country have abused the term flush so badly, and they were selling flushes. They'd dump a can of snake oil into the engine and charge you $200 for it and send you down the road and stuff like that. So flush in some areas, especially in engine flushes, has become a bad word. It's a negative word. So I guess that's the reason behind performance oil change. But for me, I would do it once a year. It's not that expensive, and it keeps the piston rings free of gunk and garbage and so on. Makes a huge difference. We've been able to take some of the Cadillacs and the Hondas that have a big problem with this, quart of oil every 100, 150, 200 miles, bring that up to where you are getting only a quart of oil every 2,000 to 3,000 miles. So just something to keep in mind. But remember, low tension piston rings, standard on most cars, you gotta change the oil. We're gonna take a break. We'll be right back here on Goss's Garage.
Operators are standing by to take your call for Pat at 844-885-4677. Goss's Garage continues in a moment.
Think you'll get a deal buying a used car from an individual instead of a dealer? Possibly, but there's a good chance you'll get taken if you wind up dealing with a curb stoner. Curb stoners are low-life scum who buy cars with problems, cobble them together, roll back the miles, make them look good, and resell them. They usually claim the car belonged to a friend or relative, and there's a sad story about a death, financial woes, illness, or other tragedy. If you buy from one of these crooks, you'll probably get a great-looking car, but in poor mechanical or body condition at a slightly lower price. But you won't get a warranty or a good, reliable car. Curb stoner cars are often so bad they only have scrap value. There are curb stoner cars all over the internet, in nearly every shopping center and sitting along the road. Total loss, flood cars are a curb stoner favorite because there are tens of thousands of them, and they're easy to disguise. So when buying off the street, question everything. When was the title issued? Is it in the seller's name? Does it show the seller's proper address? Is it from another state? Of course, always have a shop check any used car and get a Carfax vehicle history report before paying a dime. Curb stoners are crooks who will happily steal your money. So be really careful. I get lots of questions about BG products, many about specific products or services like, is BG 44K really that good, or are BG transmission, cooling system, and power steering flushes actually necessary? But most popular of all, do I use BG products in my cars? Well, the answer to all of those questions is yes. A regular schedule of BG flushes and chemicals will deliver the longest possible life from all the lubricated and fuel delivery parts on your vehicles. And do I use BG products? You bet I do. I drive nice cars, and I drive a lot. Plus, my live radio and TV shows mean that my cars have to be absolutely reliable. A no start from dirty fuel injectors or a failed transmission just isn't acceptable in my life. Remember, deposits and dirty fluids ruin expensive parts. For reliability like I demand, visit one of the quality shops that sell BG products and perform BG services. To find a BG professional near you, bgfindashop.com.
This is Goss's Garage with Pat Goss. Call the show now at 844-885-4677.
Folks, make sure to subscribe to the Goss's Garage radio show on YouTube, where you can find tips and tricks to save you time and to avoid headaches. All right, let's go to Manassas, Virginia, and let's talk to Chris. Chris, welcome back to Goss's Garage.
Thank you, Pat. Great show.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Since you have informed us about BG products, I am a big fan now. And my wife bought a 2010 Camry 2.5 during a clunker program. Now, she's, believe it or not, only has 17,500 miles on it, 6 years later.
Wow.
You mentioned that BG transmission flush should be done once every 2 years of 30,000 miles.
Right.
Since we're over 6 years now, should I have that done?
I would, because even though the mileage isn't up there, what happens is, because the transmission's made out of metal and it's vented to the air, you get moisture that builds up in there over a period of time, and you want to get that moisture out.
Well, I'll be doggone.
It's just, condensation like you get on the outside of a iced tea glass in the summer. You get the same thing inside anything that's made of metal as we get these cold nights and warmer days and so on. You get condensation in there. Wouldn't be nearly as big an issue if the car was driven more.
Oh, well, the problem is she only works about 15 minutes away. Actually, she just retired.
Uh-huh.
Not long ago, and now it's getting less miles on it.
Well, that's one of the things that we see frequently. We'll find people who go out and they look for an extremely low mileage car. We had one guy that wanted a relatively rare, I forget whether it was a Monte Carlo or a Pontiac, but a few years back they made some of these that had a sloped back on them to qualify for NASCAR or some such stuff. Anyway, he found one that was clear across the country, and it had like 23,000 miles on it, and he paid a ton of money, way above book for it. And he brought it in, and he said, I want you to check it over. He says, I know there's nothing wrong with it because it really hasn't been driven that much and so on. And when we got it in here, it was an engine where you could pull the oil filler cap off and look down in. You pull the oil filler cap off, and the only thing you could see was the bottom impression of the oil filler cap down in there. So we recommended that we pull the valve covers off it. We pulled the valve covers off, and it was like a Jell-O mold. Here is this solid bunch of sludge with the rocker arms moving up and down in the middle of this sludge, but the sludge was formed just like the inside of the valve covers, and that's because it had never been driven more than a few miles at a time, all short trips, and the owner was looking toward oil changes based on the miles rather than time. And the engine, the whole car was just a mess. It looked great. It was like new, except mechanically, and mechanically it was a disaster.
Wow. I definitely understand what you're saying there. I'm on top of her oil changes. The book, or Toyota's now saying once every 10,000 miles, and I've been doing it at every 5,000 miles, and at 20,000 miles, the dealer will do it for the second time,
Right.
which will actually be the fourth time.
Right. Yeah, and that's good. I certainly wouldn't go more than a year without an oil change because, again,
Yes, sir.
moisture buildup is the enemy here. And moisture, although it doesn't mix with oil without agitation, if you agitate it, which happens inside the engine, it will mix with oil. And when that happens, the oil gets thicker, and that's one of the things that leads to sludge in the engine.
Ooh, boy. Well, I'm trying to stay on top of it, sir.
Understand
Last
that.
question. Thank you. Last question, real quick, please. Our Toyota dealership is advertising BG transmission flushes. Can I trust them to do it correctly? As BG, I would assume would require it and provide the warranty that BG provides.
Well, they should provide the warranty. You should be able to trust them, I would hope. Of course, there are bad apples in most every operation, but I would think that the dealer certainly would know how to do it properly, and they would certainly have the at least the minimum quality of fluid to put in it.
Okay, sir, because I've heard you speak about that before a while back.
Yeah. It's and no, I'm sad to say that BG has no way to follow up on these places unless they get a bunch of complaints against them or something like that, because it's not like a franchise. You don't buy a franchise with BG. You buy the equipment, you buy the product, and so on, and you do that to offer a good service to your clients and to make money. And if you do it right and make your clients happy, then you're going to make money doing the BG services.
Pat, thank you very much. I greatly appreciate your information and knowledge, sir. Thank you.
Okay, take care, Chris. All right, let's take another break. We'll be right back on Goss's Garage.
Stay tuned. Pat will take your calls next at 844-885-4677. That's 844-885-GOSS. Goss's Garage continues in a moment.
This is National Tire Safety Week, and the Rubber Manufacturers Association says poorly maintained underinflated tires are unsafe and waste gas. So never hit the road without checking tire pressure and condition. Underinflated tires waste gas due to higher rolling resistance, which also overheats tires, making a blowout at highway speeds more likely. Properly maintained tires also last longer, which is better for the environment. A recent RMA survey found more than 30% of drivers are less concerned about mileage now that gas prices are lower, and 50% of younger drivers said mileage just doesn't matter. But cheap gas doesn't mean it's safe to ignore your tires. Other RMA safety findings are truly disturbing. Only 17% of drivers know how to properly check tire pressure. 1/3 don't know that tires must be checked cold. 1/3 don't know how to tell if their tires are worn out. 6 out of 10 drivers don't check their spare, and 4 in 10 still believe they can look at a tire and see if it's underinflated. Half of all drivers don't know where to find the proper pressure for their tires. National Tire Safety Week is a great time to learn proper tire care, then check them at least once a month. Get more details at rma.org. You probably don't think about it, but if you double the life of your car, your fixed expenses per mile will drop 50%. But how can you double the life of a car? Well, that's easy. Simply use BG products and flushes for your routine maintenance. I'll bet you know someone whose cars last a lot longer than yours, plus they never seem to have problems. Now you can enjoy those great savings too. Simply enroll in the BG Protection Plan, and BG will guarantee covered parts for as long as you own your car, in writing. With the BG Protection Plan, long after your car is paid off, you'll still have years of warranty left. Think about it. No payments and no worries about major repair bills. That's amazing. It's almost too good to be true because the BG Protection Plan is also absolutely free. My cars are covered by the BG Protection Plan. Yours should be too. For details, bgprod.com or 800-327-8883.
This is Goss's Garage with Pat Goss. Call the show now at 844-885-4677. That's 844-885-GOSS. And now, Pat Goss.
Hey folks, be sure please to subscribe to the Goss's Garage radio show on YouTube, where you can find tips and tricks to save you time and avoid headaches. Appreciate that, everybody. All right, we've been talking about power to weight ratio and fuel economy and things like that. So we know that more cylinders gives us more friction makes an engine less efficient, and so on. Other things that you have to keep in mind. Now, there are lots of sites on the internet. You can go to these sites and you can find all kinds of miracle products, magnets and vortex generators and all kinds of different things, that water injection systems and all of this stuff that are supposed to significantly, and that's the key word, significantly improve fuel economy and performance. Now, they'll have you believe you can get fuel economy and performance at the same time. All of this stuff, all of it, is pure garbage. Now, it isn't what you put into the engine, how you treat the fuel or anything like that, that ultimately controls fuel economy. You see, there are a lot of things about a car that you can't readily change. Number one, you have to keep in mind that the modern automobile is 95 to 97% efficient as far as burning all of the fuel that goes into it. So if you're burning 95% of the fuel that goes into the engine, how could you get a 30% improvement in fuel economy? So I guess what they're saying is that 95 plus 30%, you're going to get 125%. You're going to be building energy. You're going to be creating energy. I don't think so. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It can only be changed in form. You see, that's one of the things that makes all of this stuff that you waste your money on so bogus, so purely, absolutely bogus. See, even if you could make anything mechanical 100% efficient, which so far nobody has ever done on anything mechanical because of friction and other losses based on physics, because nobody has ever built a 100% efficient anything mechanical, well, you can't even hope that you could get 5%. So that is just not even on the table. So is 99% and probably 98%. So your chances of bolting one of these, anywhere from $40 to $400 devices onto your car, or building something to make Brown's gas or some other hydrogen generator or something like that, it's all garbage, folks. The reason: cars have limitations. Now, one of the biggest things that controls fuel economy is how easily the car moves through the air, because that is one of the biggest factors in fuel economy, is what it takes to move the car. And the resistance of the air as the car moves through it consumes a lot of fuel. And you can't effectively change the resistance to the air. It just can't be done without redesigning the shape of the body of the car. Other things, the weight of the vehicle. As you add weight, fuel economy goes down. So the heavier the car, the more power it takes to move the mass of the car. And there are formulas in physics that explain all of this. So you have to overcome air resistance. You have to overcome the inertia of rest of the weight of the vehicle. In addition to that, you have things that add friction, the rolling resistance of the tires. Yes, you can buy better tires. You can buy tires that have lower rolling resistance, LRR, low rolling resistance tires. You may not like the way they handle. You may not like what they do on the wet. You may not like the way they ride, but they will give you a slight improvement in fuel economy, usually something 1 to 1.5%, not miles per gallon, percent. So you have to do the math to see if they're worth what they're going to cost you in ride and handling and so on. Other things, there is friction in things like wheel bearings, the bearings that the wheels rotate on. There's friction because it's metal moving against metal. Granted, there is lubricant in there, there's grease, but there is still friction that has to be overcome. There is friction inside the transmission. There's friction in the differential on the vehicle. There is mass in turning the drive axles, or if it's rear-wheel drive, turning the drive shaft. So you've got all of these different things that are built into the vehicle that you would have to modify in order to significantly improve its fuel economy. And you can't really do that. So even though the engine may be getting great fuel economy, that fuel economy is lost through producing power to move the weight, to overcome wind resistance, to overcome rolling resistance, and all of these other things. So you can't just bolt something onto the engine or in the fuel line or something like that and get a great improvement in fuel economy. It just isn't going to work. So save your money. Remember that the things that really control fuel economy, all these weight factors and so on, that's why you take, like one of my vehicles is a Jeep. It's a brick. It's heavy. It's boxy, so it doesn't move through the air efficiently. And it has a lot of rolling resistance because it has wide tires. The wider you go with the tires, the harder they are to roll down the road and so on. It has wide tires on it. It has all-wheel drive, so I'm pulling all the wheels all the time. That consumes fuel economy, and so on. So if you look at its little 6-cylinder engine in this big brick of a vehicle, if you took the engine out of the Jeep and put it into some compact front-wheel drive car, which they did in some situations, the mileage would shoot up. Same engine, same everything, except where the engine is positioned. And that means that we have put it into a lighter, more efficient chassis, and now the mileage, instead of 17 to 21 miles to the gallon, boom, it shoots up to, something like 30 or 31 miles to the gallon. And that's simply because we reduced the weight, we reduced the rolling resistance, we reduced all of these resistance factors that we have to power through to get the brick of a Jeep moving, which we didn't have to power through to get the front-wheel drive compact car moving. So these are things that you have to think these things through. You have to understand the basics of physics. You have to understand how things work. That's why I'm a big fan of knowing how stuff works, because I'm a firm believer that unless you know how something works, there's no possible way you can know how to diagnose it, how to repair it, and so on. So, especially the diagnostic end of things. But the big thing here is that you want to watch out for any kind of a miracle for gas mileage. And whenever they say that they can improve gas mileage by some big number and you're going to get more horsepower and you can get both of them together, that ain't possible, folks. See, the only way you get more horsepower is by burning more fuel. It's the only way. You can't get more horsepower by burning less fuel. You can only get more horsepower by burning more fuel. And again, it's back to physics. You have a measurement of heat energy. It's called BTUs, British Thermal Units. And in an engine, you convert the burning fuel into heat energy, and more heat energy means more power out of the engine. And in order to get more heat energy, you have to put more fuel in to get more BTUs to make the car develop more horsepower. Save your money, everybody. All right. I think I've been on my soapbox long enough. Thank you for listening. And, of course, thanks to Steve McMillan, George Stockton, and Chris DePamphilis for producing today's show. For everyone here at Goss's Garage, I'm Pat Goss. Until next time, please, everybody, drive gently. We'll see ya.